There's a new class of blockbuster drugs. Drugs like Ozempic. They're changing bodies.
And all of a sudden, just the weight starts falling off.
Fortunes.
It just got too expensive.
They're just bank breakers.
And industries.
There was a lot of excitement. There was a lot of skepticism.
The impact of these drugs, from business to health, is just beginning.
From the Journal, $1 Trillion Shot. Find it in the Journal feed wherever you get your podcasts.
Come meet me at the Musial with Alan and Daniel. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. Everyone come gather round, listen to your favorite sound. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We'll talk the games and all the rest, about the team that we love best. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We're gonna talk about the Cardinals all night long.
Good morning. Welcome into another edition of Meet Me at Musial. I'm your host, Daniel Shoptaw at C70. With me, as always, Alan Medlock, a Medlock1 on the Twitters. We are coming at you Saturday morning after what has been a rough so far series in Chicago. It was a busy week with the trade deadline, Alan. We've got a lot of things we can get to. And let's start with the trade deadline. I think that'll work our way up. Cardinals make two significant moves. One, bringing in Tommy Pham and Erick Fedde. The second, sending out Dylan Carlson. Let's talk about the big move first. What did you think when you heard about it?
I thought they had a great deadline, and it was one of those situations where you and I had talked about, hey, they need to prove that they're going for this. You know, you're close enough now, even if you're not playing as well as you had a month ago, you still got to prove that, hey, we're still in this a little bit. And I felt like it was a great move for the Cardinals, especially for next year. You get the additional year of Fedde, and then you bring back Pham, who obviously has jolted the offense a little bit. Selfishly, that's what I want to see him do. And then it turns around into trade Carlson, which you and I talked about, seemed like a foregone conclusion anyway. He's extremely good to me. Deadline felt like they had a lot of movement, a lot of proof that they're all in. And it's tough right now when you see like, oh, crap. Of course they make the move and then start playing poorly. I mean, you still have a month and a half, 2 months to go. You know, I know that can bury you, but I feel like they're on the right track now. I was pretty fired up with the moves.
You can't argue with what they did. And you definitely can argue. I mean, to get what was probably maybe second, third best pitcher on the market, literally on them. I mean, there are pitchers that people said, hey, this guy and this guy, like Turk Stubble, but I never expected him to get moved.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I was not, like you and I talked about last week, I was not expecting Crochet to move after the demands. So, I agree with you.
And the White Sox, I think we've proven the White Sox not really 100% sure know what they're doing. But so, you get the second best, third best pitcher, maybe behind Jack Flaherty, on the market, and you get a guy in Tommy Pham that really helps the offense, and you do it basically by giving up not much. I mean, I think if you had said you could get Fedde for Tommy Edman, I don't think anybody would have believed you, right? I think that we would have thought that. I mean, one, maybe, and I will definitely cop to this, undervalue Tommy Edman, mainly because he's, at best a league average hitter at times. But the defense and the versatility is a big thing for sure. But I don't think we would have ever thought, even us wouldn't have necessarily thought, okay, that's worth a starter that's on a good contract that has another year of control. But then to basically, do that and get Tommy Pham, and I know, you get the Dodgers involved, and then, you get money back from the White Sox. I think I saw that was like $100 and something thousand that basically covered something in Tommy Pham's contract. And then you're going to get either a cash or a player to be named later from the Dodgers, which neither one of those is going to be significant, but still to be receiving all of that and to just give up Tommy Edman and a pitcher from the DSL that still hasn't even pitched in low A ball here yet. It was one of the most best deals. I mean, just looking at the limitations he had and what he gave up and everything like that, I think it was one of his best deadline deals that he's done. And yeah, I don't. I mean, you get on the other side. We can talk about Carlson here in a little bit, but I think the most surprising part of the whole thing was Tommy Pham, wasn't it? I mean, and maybe it shouldn't have been because we saw Matt Carpenter and we've seen Lance Lynn, so maybe we shouldn't be surprised that Mo was continuing to get the band back together. But given the dramatics of the Tommy Pham's first pass through St. Louis, I don't know that anybody really expected the Cardinals to go that route again.
Well, in the beginning, I thought the exact same thing. Like in the beginning of the season, as it grew on, I thought, you know what, that's going to be a perfect shot for them. There's not going to be a huge investment there. There's some familiarity. I think that it's water under the bridge. I think that he's kind of. I think that he's kind of changed. I think people have kind of changed their perception of him, of just being rough and tumble to now just being a competitor. And I felt like that was one of those moves that I was like, that's low hanging fruit, and we talked about that last week. And, if you remember, we had the wish list of Eflin, Fairbanks, and Pham, because I thought that's an easy one. And then when you look at the Fedde deal with the plus year coming over from Korea, who I highly think that they've already scouted him, the fact that they have a history there, the move seemed really, really easy for them to make and seemed like a win-win. So I was glad. And it's funny, I was after the morning after, I thought, I want to see what the ovation's like, because I bet it will be pretty good. And it was. And then, of course, to see what happened. And then he keeps hitting.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think that's going to be a spark plug for him. And, when you look back a little bit, hindsight, of course, is always 20/20. You could kind of see that one coming. I mean, everything you said was perfect. And even you wrapped it up. I felt like you had a good post this week about the money aspect of it, to where that may be an aspect that we haven't really looked upon. And some of the reporting may have been true, that there was maybe some financial constraints on these deals. But let's put it this way. They've moved out two guys that they didn't have room for anymore, for guys that will help them out this year and next year, in a rotation that has a lot of question marks, just due to, I mean, it was their own doing of the 1-year deals. And of course, you don't know what Matt's will be, but yeah, you're right. I mean, it was a great deal, because I wondered, I'm like, well, let's see who they're going to have to give up on this. And, you keep every prospect you have, and then you move out two guys who you may just not have. Well, I know we're getting to that a little bit, but you see where I'm going.
Yep.
You move out an Edman, who, I mean, I love for his versatility, but you're right. I mean, it was the square peg, round hole type situation, to where there just wasn't any more room. And a guy that hadn't played all year for you. That's I walked away really pleased with what they've done, and what they've done for the future.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that Tommy Edman, how he was going to fit into this roster with, with Michael Ciani, kind of covering center field, and with Wynn playing shortstop, and how this was all going to work. And we figured it out how it was going to work. It's not, and I just think and we should, maybe it should have, because this is basically the Harrison Bader trade all over again.
Yeah.
But I was very surprised that Tommy Edman would get traded when he hadn't played all year. Because I mean, I know that he's coming back, but it's a wrist injury. It's a guy that should have been back in spring training and is still not back here as we record the 3rd of August. Yes, he'll probably play this year, but what is he going to be? I'm just interested. It's interesting that somebody, and he wasn't even like, I kind of, this makes this deal work. The Yankees were in on Edman, from all reporting. The Dodgers were interested. The White Sox were going to take him in the Fedde deal until Mo wanted to get Tommy Pham. Although I think the White Sox were probably just going to flip him to the Dodgers or somebody like that anyway. I assume. Then again, as we've seen, we're not 100% sure what the White Sox are doing, except losing. So I was very surprised that he had that kind of cachet, and obviously he's got a reputation, and it'll probably work out, right? I mean, I'm sure he'll probably be a postseason hero for the Dodgers because that's the way these
Oh
teams
yeah,
go.
without a doubt. That's whenever you saw that's where he was going, you go, well, he'll have a good finish. I mean, essentially going back to where, I say California's a huge state, but that's where he's from.
Right.
And the Dodgers know how to use these well. You know what I mean? It's one of those deals to where, Chris Taylor has not been very good for them this year. You add in Pham, who can play everywhere, probably takes that spot, rotate, or that postseason spot, and he'll be really good for him. And, you wish him the best in that situation.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that goes with the other trade as well, as Dylan Carlson goes to the Rays, and it was, you're right, it was a situation where there was just no place to put Dylan Carlson, and especially after you get Tommy Pham, there you had to do something. I think the people that say just option him to Memphis because he did have 3 options have a point, right? I mean, this is still a guy that you could keep under control. You didn't necessarily have to move in this way, but it really seemed like this wasn't going to work in
Sure.
St. Louis. Mo kind of said afterwards, he said, look, mistakes on both sides on how things were going. But it felt like it was a fresh start type of thing. And I think that's probably true. I think he needs, I don't know that he needs an extended run at AAA. I feel like we saw in spring training, just leave him alone. He might be able to eventually kind of get his feet under him and go. And in fact, he's already hit a home run for Tampa Bay when he didn't do that at all for St. Louis this year. So,
yeah.
Tampa Bay's an organization will probably get a lot out of him, and we know it's not the first Cardinal outfielder to go out there. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he does out there, but I think it was also a situation where both sides needed a change.
Sure. And, a couple years ago when we heard about him giving up switch hitting and, moving that direction and moving positions and then the injuries. Yeah. I mean, it just never seemed to catch on. I felt bad for him because Chip brought this up on the broadcast of, you feel bad for Carlson because everything was going right until the shoulder injury this spring.
Yeah. Yeah.
How it was one of those to where he would have probably had a run to see what he could do this spring if not for the injury. Now, look what Siani's done with that. You know what I mean? He essentially pushed out a guy who was probably on the edge anyway, that, it moved him on. Yeah. Knowing that we've seen him grow up and we've seen him as a top prospect, you hope that he goes down to Tampa Bay and does well. And I could probably see it because it's one of those, when anybody comes around and, of course they see 20,000 pitches, home runs. Yes, they're difficult, but in these situations they happen. But it's always one of those to where when you see a guy do this right away, you wonder if the pressure valve's just been released a little bit.
Yeah.
And that he's like, hey, I'm out of there. You're not playing in front of a lot of people. That each mistake's going to cost you playing time. You just kind of wonder, it's like, okay, man, I'm kind of glad to get out of there a little bit. As much as it hurts Cardinals fans, I think that happens a lot. I think that these guys leave and they're like, okay, that was the boiler room essentially.
Yeah.
Now let's go and compete. And I think that's what he's done. And like I said, on both of the trades, you wish him the best, and it's exciting for him, and now it's a fresh start for whatever Cardinal outfielder comes along now. It's what worries me, and it seems like there's always the whipping boy that Cardinals fans have, and I sure hope that doesn't fall on the 22-year-old Jordan Walker. One of those things. And I'm glad they kept him. I'm glad that they're being patient with this. I know that there's some anger about how things are going, but keep in mind he is 22 years old and does not turn 23 until next year. So let's hope that the target didn't go to his back.
Well, I don't think that goes to his back, but I think that if
Well,
if it's
I
going to
bet I know where
shift,
this is going.
it's going to Nolan Gorman.
Yeah, well,
Because
yeah,
I
you're
mean,
right.
well, and
You're right.
what I say that in part because he has his times, he struggles, he goes up and down, and I think, but also I've seen people note in the last week we've seen Gorman not play. Since the trades, we've seen Gorman not
Yes.
play in situations where he normally would have, and it's also led people to think that okay, here are the Cardinals going to mess up another guy. And
Sure.
I don't know that that's the case. I mean, it does not hurt for Nolan Gorman to get a reset or something like that. And he's obviously, you know, had his moments and he's had his struggles. So, and I get with Tommy Pham, especially coming in and hitting well, they're probably going to give him a little bit of a run there. But I think that that's a possibility. I don't know that I am 100% on that, but I can easily see that being the situation. Maybe not as much for fan base to put it on him, although there's some of that because, when Nolan's going through that stretch of striking out, 8 times in 3 games or something,
Agreed.
it gets rough. But I think there's a chance that if the organization is going to do some of the things that they've done in the past with prospects or with young players, and I don't know if we can consider Gorman a prospect after he's played so much. I mean, I think he's coming into almost getting into veteran status now. But for a young player, there's a possibility that's something to worry about, I guess.
No, that's a great point. And the reason I didn't think about that because I was basically just thinking who's the next outfielder that we're going to jettison.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you make a great point on that because there was literally a point. It was probably Sunday or Monday where I just about sent a message to you saying I wouldn't be completely shocked if Gorman's involved in a deal at this point because I thought it depends on how big they're going to go. But I thought that may be a guy that's going to start getting the Carlson treatment. As a matter of fact, I thought about that, but I never. I mean, I don't know because a lot of mine comes from those frustrations too of oh my goodness, yeah, the power's there, I get it, but you're a strikeout or double play waiting to happen,
right?
Which comes with hitting the ball hard, of course, but yeah, it's pretty frustrating. Now it makes me feel bad for him, but you're right, I could see that happening really quickly.
Yeah, and maybe not. Maybe he continues to develop and all that, but it does feel like Gorman has been very boom or bust, and when those booms are going, it's amazing. But it also
Yeah,
feels like, and for me, and again, I'm since I'm not watching as much, I feel a little disconnected. But it feels like those. It's been a while since he's had a hot stretch. It feels to me.
agreed. Yeah, no, agreed. I would even go back as far as like just the series in Washington, which turns out that's kind of been an outlier.
Yeah, yeah. I don't. So I don't know. I mean, I think there's some some value there. Now, again, with Tommy Edman gone, you don't have to worry about them putting Edman at second base, right, constantly, and we never see Gorman. But I think they're doing a little bit of a reset with him now, and hopefully here in the next few days we'll see him a little bit more regularly, and maybe the time off will help. But
Yeah,
I think that's a situation to kind of watch. But yeah, and then I guess the part of the Carlson trade was that going into after they make the White Sox trade, then the buzz starts going around Carlson, right? Because everybody kind of did
yes.
feel like that was going to happen.
Well, you and I had even talked about it.
Yeah,
We were like, okay, well, you can see what's coming next.
yeah, and he was linked to 2 or 3 different relievers. Dylan Florio from the Nationals and Luis Garcia from the Padres for sure. We know those. We heard
Yeah.
those names, and there could have been others. I'm sure there were. So when the Cardinals go get Sean Armstrong, and you look at those numbers, it was definitely a step down from the pitchers that he had been linked to.
Yeah.
Which did make me think that there were financial considerations involved there. Now, you talked about the post that I wrote on the Substack, and as I was writing through that, I realized both those guys got traded, and they got traded for a lot more than Dylan Carlson. So it's very possible that if he was linked to those guys, it was not going to be a one-on-one, and that wasn't going to work. But still, when you've got that level of player kind of in mind, and you get a guy in Armstrong who had a very good 2023, but then has struggled so far this year. It's a bit of a disappointment, even though Dylan Carlson doesn't have a whole lot of value, just because of those. When you start putting it in the context of, oh, this is what they could have gotten in theory, and this is what they did get. It was a little bit of a downer, a little bit surprising that again you don't just option him to Memphis instead of getting a guy that isn't necessarily doesn't look like all that, although he has had some success.
Sure. Well, the optimistic side of me wants to say that of the guys that they could have gotten, they saw Armstrong and thought, hey, we think we can fix what that is.
Right.
That's what I would think.
Mm-hmm.
And but I 100% think this was a more for Carlson trade than it was for Armstrong.
Sure.
Hey, we're moving him regardless. I will say this, and this is just recency bias, and tell me if I'm wrong. I don't remember a time where they were basically saying we're trading this guy 3 days before they traded him. You know what I mean? Because there was Mo basically said, hey, change of scenery's coming, type situation to him. And there were 2 days before the deadline where they said, well, Carlson's waiting on getting dressed.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, there's a lot of moving parts involved in that, of course, to seal the deal. And you can read the tea leaves to tell that Mo's slow on these, because it was funny because Getz came out and made the comment that they had been working on the trade strictly between the White Sox and Cardinals for over a week.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, wow. And then when things didn't look like they were working out is when Mo got brought in the Dodgers in the situation. But, I just feel like that's the last time I remember that. There may be another one, I don't know. But, it was funny I know at least 2 days before the deadline, there were comments about him waiting to get dressed. So whether they knew something was in the works now, telling him not to that something's about to happen, or just being blunt, and saying, hey, you're moving. I don't know.
I do remember the day of the deadline, coming down to 5 o'clock deadline, and it's a 6:45 start. And he was, still in that limbo, didn't know what to do. Which has got to be, it's hard, right? You're probably leaving, and they probably had given him some heads up, but they're still not, you don't know for sure.
Sure.
You don't know if you need to go and be with these guys. You don't know if you need to go to Memphis. You don't need, because he had to go somewhere because they had to fill out a spot for Tommy Pham. So he was probably not going to be in St. Louis, at game time, or he was not going to be on the roster at game time. But still, trying to figure that out is tough. And a lot of players went through that. And I know I put something out about that, and I got some pushback. And then there's that idea that these guys get paid a lot of money, and if because they get paid a lot of money that we don't get paid, obviously, that they're not deserving of some basic humanity here. It doesn't matter how much, it doesn't matter how much money you're making. It's still that uncertainty, that idea of what am I doing, where am I going?
Yeah.
This team doesn't want me anymore, or and it's the only place I've ever known, especially in a place like Carlson. There's a lot of things that go on. Now, do they have a support system that helps a lot of that? Do they have the money to do? Yes, it's not the same as the uncertainty of other people in their jobs. I get that, but it's still, I just felt like, Carlson's 24, and just that, kind of helplessness is a frustrating thing, especially when you're, it's coming down to, I don't know what to do today. I don't need to do right now. It's not even this, nebulous cloud of, oh, I might get traded. It's like, I'm kind of stuck right now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, difficult situation. Yeah. And you feel bad for him. Yeah, because I mean, you hit on all great points there of yeah, this uncertainty stinks, and I have to perform at a high level regardless.
Mm-hmm.
If I get called on. So yeah, it's a difficult spot, and you feel bad for how it all played out, and hope for the best now that he has a fresh start.
So Cardinals, remake the team a little bit. They weren't the only ones in the division, right? The Brewers made a couple trades. Pirates made a number of trades that kind of added on.
Oh yeah,
Even the Cubs made some deals that were kind of a little bit of this year, a little bit more probably for next year, but they didn't break everything down, right? Nobody did really. The Reds did not make as many trades as I expected either. So unless I
they're
missed
kind of
one.
in limbo too.
Yeah. But I don't think I don't know that this race reset itself much with the trade deadline, right? And it's frustrating a little bit that the Cardinals have now, since the deadline, lost 3 of 5. And they've slipped 2.5 games out of the wild card spot. They are 6.5 behind the Brewers. There was a lot of excitement those last 2 games against the Rangers. A lot of runs put up, all that kind of stuff. And to then come to Chicago and lose a game when Ryan Helsley becomes human, and then to lose the first game with Erick Fedde, it's been a frustrating week on the field, I guess.
Yes, it has, and it's the timing of a Cubs series over a weekend like this. It was terrible, and I worried about this one because you get past the deadline, you get the new guys in. There's the added amount of pressure, and you're getting to the stretch run, and it would be nothing more for the Cubs to try to play themselves back into this, or to be the spoiler to St. Louis. And they clearly have. I mean, that was the gut punch of game one.
Mm-hmm.
You win that one, you feel pretty good about it, because I think that, at worst, you need to walk away with a split. I said, to make you feel a little bit better, you need to win the series against a rival. Well, that clearly can't happen. And then they're going to have to win 2 in a row, which to me right now seems difficult. So you'll just have to see. Hopefully Gibson comes out and then spins some, and then they can continue to score some runs. So, I don't know, but yeah, it's disappointing timing and disappointing performance. And it's one you're like, well, just hang around. 2.5. You have the Mets coming in on Monday. You can sneak one out. You can gain a game if you don't lose any more ground, and see where you are at this point. The one thing that worries me is something that we've talked about now for over a month. They have not moved that run differential at all.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, they're the only one that's really in the race that's in the negative. So you don't know if they're coming back down to earth, or if they're going to be able to turn that around. I mean, Arenado and Goldschmidt have actually hit a little bit better. I know that we put a lot of the offense on them, but I mean, I think the Cardinals have put a lot of the offense on them. And you can kind of see, but yeah, to come in and lose this series against a rival in a situation like that, when you bring everybody in, it's tough.
Yeah, that you're right. We've mentioned run differential on here a couple times, and it was been around -38. It was -38 like twice, and then I think we cut it to -31, and right now it's -39, and that's after 2. It was 2 blowouts, and then 2 blowout wins got them back. I mean, it's kind of it hasn't changed a lot. And yeah, it is frustrating. And we talked about it. I think we talked about it last week, where that kind of made you indicate, hey, how much do you go for it this year? Because this team is currently 2 games over 500. By run differential, they should be 8 games under 500. And again, run differential isn't everything.
And they were terrible to start the season, which
right.
You can loop in. I mean, I get it.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think I wrote about that someone, and I did the numbers, but it's not been just that beginning of the year thing.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it wasn't that they got down like 70 runs, early on, and they're digging their way out of that hole. Like we said, it's been sticking around this, 38. for a long time. And, um, and then they got beat up by a couple teams, then they beat up on the Rangers, and they're still sitting in that area. And it's been long enough that you think that's just, right now, even if you're saying, okay, they're playing basically break even, right?
Yeah.
They're scoring as many as they give up. And what is a break even team but a 500 team? I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not, they went forward to the deadline, and that's probably what they should have done. But you look at, the Mets game's weird, right? Because it is that one game makeup. And so you just never know exactly how that's going to work out. It's a 4:15 at start, which is a
Yeah.
weird start, right? All of that is going to be a weird thing. Then you get the Rays come in, you get Dylan Carlson to come back to town. You got that short, 2-game series against the Royals, and then you have a Sunday off. The schedule's a little bit weird for this week, and then you get into some really tough teams: the Dodgers or the Brewers, the Twins. I just I'm a little bit. It's a little bit concerning when you do lose to the Cubs. You're right. I think the Cardinals have. I don't want to say no choice, but if they don't win the next 2 games and split the series, I think there's some significant concern about where they're headed over the next month.
Well, you're right. I mean, because just schedule alone, Kansas City's in this,
Mhm.
so you have to go in there after they swept you, and then
Right.
you have the Brewers 3, and then you have the Padres again this month. Which,
Mhm.
if you play well, you can make up some ground, but if you play poorly, you're going to be buried.
Yeah.
And that's August is going to be probably the biggest month in the season for them, and that's why the gut punch of Thursday's so rough, because you're
Mhm.
like, man, that would have been a game in hand. You could kind of
Right.
obviously Fedde pitched well outside of the second inning yesterday, and you're thinking, okay, that's going to work. That'll play. You keep him down. There was a 3-run bomb by a guy that doesn't hit much. I mean, those
Mhm.
things happen, but those things happening right now is where it's going to get a little bit ugly, and you just kind of hope to keep your head above water, and you definitely don't want to lose the series, but I expect them to this weekend.
Yeah, and I mean, you've got, like you said, August has got the Dodgers, who are a first place team. They got the Yankees, who are tied for first in maybe the best division in baseball. You've got the Royals, who are second in the Central. You've got the Padres, who are technically third in the West, but like I said, leading the wild card, or leading the Cardinals in the wild card. Um, that's a lot. That's a lot of games against some really good teams. So we will see how that pans out, but it is worrisome. Because you need to win the games that, against teams like this. And it's hard to put it all on Ryan Helsley's feet for Thursday night because he's been so good. And that was like the first game. I think I saw the first game the Cardinals had lost when leading after 8 all season long.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing. My biggest concern, though. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Go
well, I mean,
ahead.
and that's
Yeah,
going to happen, right? I mean, that
yeah,
eventually you're going to have a night like
exactly.
that. I was surprised that he gave up a 2-run lead. I mean, 1 run, a bloop and a blast, sure, okay, that happens. But 2-run lead, and especially the way he did it, kind of, it took a sustained inning against him, and that was a little bit surprising. It's also surprised. I don't know. He hasn't pitched that much. We talked about it at the All-Star break, right? That he, kind of made a need of the break, and then after the All-Star break, counting the break and all that, he just hasn't thrown that many times. There's Cardinals have been blown out, or they've won a lot, or they've had double headers, or whatever the case may be. He just hasn't pitched a lot of games. I don't know if that's a problem or if this is, like I say, it's just that one-time thing, and I don't guess we'll know until the next time he goes out there.
Yeah, yeah. Those are the ones that's the stuff that bothers me the most. You're just like, well, the you haven't blown a lead in forever, which is obviously shows that that's one of the strengths. Now, if that's going to fall apart, then that run differential is really going to come into play.
Oh yeah,
Because if one of your strengths starts slipping, then you're going to be in trouble. That was my first thought after he blew it. I was like, oh boy. I said that's the first one he's blown in a while, and he's played with fire a lot. So now are things going to start coming back down to normal? I hope not. So, I don't know. As much as a Helsley fan as I am, Oklahoma kid, same school, all that good stuff. it's tough to watch because he allows about a base runner an inning, which is difficult. And yeah, in there, I mean, the Bellinger home run was a 2-strike pitch that was it was decent. I mean, it was down and away. He went down and got it. And then you just see the rally after that. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, all 3 of those hits were 2 strikes. And that's the stuff that's your snake bit a little bit on that one. And it's difficult.
Yeah. I mean, you would expect Helsley to be able to put those guys away with 2 strikes. So yeah, I get that. Let me pull that up real quick because I've got it here. But I mean, it would not be surprising that you're right on that, because it and again, that's the other thing, right? I mean, after a home run, you don't necessarily expect, 4-3. You kind of think, okay, well, that happened, and you move on. And 2 outs, you had 2 outs in a 1-run game, and then single, double. That's surprising. Let's see. Now Horner was a first pitch. He jumped on that. Swanson was a 2-strike pitch that doubled that tied the game, and then Tauchman was a 2-strike pitch.
I thought it was. I thought it
was.
was.
So yeah, those last 2 were, they had him down to the final strike on Swanson, and then had a strike on Tauchman. Although you would have had to, you could have gotten out of that inning. So yeah, I mean, it is, you'd like to see Helsley put that away, but there are nights where you just don't have it, and it's hard. We shouldn't draw a lot from one game. It's hard not to, because it is a frustrating game that you worry about. But I mean, if he comes out today and goes 1, 2, 3, then we're all okay. Everything's back to normal.
Yeah, that's true.
If he doesn't, then if he blows another one in the next week, I think that's when you start thinking, is something catching up with him? And then the other case is the Cubs seem to have something on him, right? I was seeing some numbers. I mean, he struggled against them a couple times. I think he's got like a 9 ERA against them this year, and like a 0 against everybody else. Basically, I don't remember. I just kind of glanced at the tweet, but it's significant enough. And I think Derek Gould even said that there was he wrote an article about 4 or 5 weeks ago, I guess, when they faced the Cubs last time, about how the that Helsley seemed to be tipping pitches. The Cubs had a read on him.
Wow.
And that Helsley had tried to fix it, but apparently doesn't look like maybe he had. So, it could be.
It makes me think if it's an off-speed pitch, because that's exactly what all 3 of them hit.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it could be just the Cubs have figured something out. And if that's the case, good for them. If it's only one team, as long as it doesn't get to everybody else. But I guess that's best case scenario right now.
Yeah, I hope so. That's where it's always doom and gloom when we're on here, unfortunately. But yeah, that's I remember that being said now, and the fact that they have beat him up a couple of times makes me feel a little bit better, honestly.
Yeah. Hopefully, you move on from that and not worry about it, and it makes them hay this week. We'll see how it goes. I'm trying to think what else has gone on. I mean, it was a busy week. It does feel like, and again, I haven't looked at the numbers, so I could be wrong, but anecdotally, it feels like we're starting to see a little bit more out of Goldschmidt and Arenado, doesn't it?
Sure.
Goldie I know he had the home run. What was it, Sunday, that won the game? Or was that 2 weeks ago now? That was this week.
That was Sunday. That was, yeah.
It's been a week. And then he had another one early. I think I mean, it's not going to be Paul Goldschmidt MVP, but it feels like he's starting to stir a little bit to be a little bit more of a threat. And no one's kind of the same way. And maybe the addition of Tommy Pham is going to help that as well. I mean, just the new energy that comes with that, right? I mean, this is a guy that we hear, Nolan and others asked for by name most of the season, right? They kept saying, we got to get Tommy Pham back in here, which was a fascinating thing to me to hear. I don't think I've ever heard that before. I know they've asked, I've heard of players asking, hey, we need to get a bat in here or this or that. but I don't know that I've ever heard them, a specific guy being asked for. Um, and knowing, and you had to know what that meant, right? And to know that meant Dylan Carlson was going to be gone, or in some form or fashion, or somebody was going to be gone. But it's still, it's interesting the reputation that Tommy Pham has, kind of, in the fan base and in the media versus players, because players, except for maybe Jock Peterson, really seem to like, this is the guy I want on my team.
Yeah, yeah, that's that one surprised me a lot. I guess that he trained on with him, and I did not know this, that Pham went to Florida to try to get the Cardinals to sign him to a minor league contract before he committed to the White Sox. He was on fair territory and was talking about those things as well. He didn't say that part, but that was reported. But he did say he was disappointed because he didn't get an offer till well into spring training.
Yeah.
So he was trying to get back to St. Louis and just kind of took what he thought was the best offer. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting how much this has rallied back to where, I don't know, things change, but then it also turns into one of those. I mean, has our perception been wrong this whole time?
I mean, again, the way he comes off, the fiery nature of Tommy Pham, you would think would wear on people after a while, right? I mean,
Sure.
it's definitely like, okay, rah rah, yeah, great, and then all of a sudden it's like, after so much of that, it's like, oh, come on, dude. But it doesn't seem to be. It does, and the fact that he is, a guy that is doing everything to win, and he's not. And we saw it this week. His as soon as he gets to St. Louis, he's out early, taking fly
Yeah.
balls and do. I mean, he puts in the work, and I think that's what the players will see. If you're going to talk the talk, you better walk the walk, and that's what he does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I did see that about him coming to really kind of lobby mode to get a job, and it sounded like that the Cardinals gave it some serious consideration, and I think if they had known that Tommy Edman was going to be out this long, they'd have done it, right?
Yeah.
But it was this idea that Edman's coming back, and we'll be Carlson wasn't hurt at the time, and we're kind of good, and then everything went the way it did. It's much like Erick Fedde that most said that they scouted him, in the KBO, and were really interested in signing him, but it sounds like, and I think you can argue this point. He signed. It sounded like that. After he signed Lennon Gibson, and of course, then the Sonny Gray thing came together. Then they didn't have a spot for him, and then you're like, well, why did you push so hard to get Lennon Gibson? I mean,
Yeah.
if you had this idea, get one of them, and again, that's a situation, and it's not like it's been terrible for the Cardinals, right? But it hasn't been, and we don't know. I mean, who knows what Erick Fedde would have been? Again, we saw he struggled yesterday. First time jitters. We'll
Yeah.
give I'm not going to say that this was a terrible. They made a bad move here, but would he have been as good in a different situation than when you can pitch for the White Sox? You don't have to worry about the game right this year. I mean,
Sure.
you just do your thing, and if they lose, it's not on you.
Yeah. Well, and another thing too, I've heard defensively they're terrible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, of course they are. I mean, they're really historically bad right now.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty optimistic about the move, and it makes me wonder if they didn't offer him a 1-year deal, and that's what they kind of lost to Chicago.
Well, I don't know if they got that far. I just think because I think they got Lennon Gibson, and they they had started to scout him, and were probably going to be interested in talking to him. I don't know if they ever got to the talking.
It's such a
stage.
Cardinals move, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
To get somebody coming back overseas after,
yeah.
I mean, it would have made a lot of sense.
Which is the concern, I think, if you're going to have a concern on Erick Fedde. I think the concern is they did this with Miles Michaelis, and we saw Miles Michaelis have a really good first year back, and then he's never quite done that again, right? He's had some significant struggles. Is Fedde going to have the same kind of struggles next year? Now, he's $7.5 million. So, if he can be league average, I think you're still getting your money's worth. But I do think that if you're planning on him being your number 2 starter next year, that might blow up in your face. I mean, does that make you know
Yeah, I
what I'm
mean,
saying?
potentially.
You
Yeah,
know?
no, I got you. I get completely. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I mean,
Mhm.
here's I'm almost more I'm more optimistic than most on Michaelis.
Okay.
Just because I mean, I felt like he's done his job. I understand you have to blow up innings, but you got a guy that throws a ton of innings for you and goes deep all the time, gets you a ton of ground balls, I feel like he's what you expected.
I think that to some degree, yes. I understand what you're saying. I mean, it is hard to say that a guy with a 5 ERA is what we expected, but you're right. I mean, he has a number of games where he's pitching into 6th or 7th and keeping you in the ball game. I agree with that. I think that the problem is if he's your number 4 starter, he's doing his job, but he's the number 2 starter. You know what I'm saying? I
Yeah,
think
they may all be. Yeah, go ahead. I got you
right. I
completely.
mean, and it's not his fault. It's more the fact that the organization's put a whole bunch of people together that, and we've talked about this all year long, that there's just not a number 2. I mean, Fedde probably is now, be given the way he's pitched this year. Um, but you know, Gibson's pitched like more like a number 2 or 3. The rest of them have pitched more like a backup in a rotation, and I think that's
Yeah,
just the problem. I mean, with Michaelis, if he was number 3 or number 4 in your rotation, I think you'd be fine because you're right. You get a lot of good, decent games out of him. But Baseball Reference has him at half a WAR this season. He is, he struggled at times. I mean, he definitely has some blowups. So I think that's my issue with him is just that there's not a lot of consistency there.
sure. Yeah, I mean, I can see it. I mean, I get it.
Yeah. But I think you're right too in the fact that we tend to we kind of look at those surface numbers a lot of times, and we overlook the fact that he threw 6 scoreless innings against the Nationals or 7 scoreless against Pittsburgh. I mean, there are games where he will step up. Um,
Yeah.
it's just that they're sometimes followed by real ugly
Yeah,
games.
clunker. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and he's not had his ERA. Let's see, I'm looking at it. The lowest he had it at 4.59 looks like. And then ERA is not everything. I know that. But the lowest he's had his ERA is 4.59 after his game against the Cubs where he gave up 1 run in 6 1/3 back
Yeah.
in mid-June. For the most part this year it's been over 5. And that's even in today's day and age of, things, that's a hard thing to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. It's I mean, point taken.
Yeah. But it is what it is, and you've got another year of it too.
Yeah.
I I don't know that Erick Fedde's going to be different, obviously, but I think there is a concern, and I think we've seen this a little bit, not just with Michaelis, but we saw it a little bit with a few others that have come across, mainly relievers, that they have that one good year when they come back to the States or come to the States for the first time, whichever. But then the league adjusts,
Yep.
and the second year is not as quite as strong. And I think that we don't know I don't know. Maybe there's more information out there than know, but I don't know how much Fedde. I know obviously Fedde made some adjustments while he was in the KBO. But is his success because of those adjustments, and it's going to be continuing on next year, or is it because people didn't see him and now they have? I don't know. Well, we don't know, but I think again at 7.5 million, it's definitely a gamble worth taking, right?
Sure.
Because I mean, he's even if he gave you what Miles Michaelis gives you this year, which I don't think he will. I think it'll be better. He'd still probably. I mean, 7.5 million would still probably get you a 5 ERA pitcher these days, right? Because that's the prices are insane.
Yeah. It's you're right. I mean, the concern is there. But But yeah, I mean, it falls right into the line of, we're going to have Gray and who could be a 2 and a bunch of 3s and 4s at best. And I think that's what they hope for. You and I talked a little bit of the last week about how one of the, probably Gibson at this point, probably gets re-signed just because no one's knocking on the door. And it was a worthwhile gamble because that's about in line with what they're going to pay.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and again, you're right. I think we have to think about the payroll that they're going to have, and it's very interesting. And like I said, I wrote about it some that I did, but it was interesting to me how the reporting out there was the Cardinals had said that you're not taking on salary for the next couple of years when here at the deadline. And I just don't remember ever hearing that before. I mean, we know that they don't want to take on a lot, but we've also, you've kept your powder dry, put their quotes, to be able to add at the deadline. Whether they didn't do that this year, but I think more than anything, it's just that uncertainty around the TV contract. They're locking down as much as they can right now, and I don't know what that means for this winter. I don't know what that means for next year. Um, I don't expect it to be a very busy winter, I guess, because of that.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. It's I think the Cardinals with what they want to be, we're seeing a lot of it. You think you're going to build on when Burleson, Contreras is in hand for a while. You're going to see what you get out of it. Well, I'm under the assumption that Goldschmidt's not back. If not, it's going to be on a favorable deal if he is.
Right.
Gorman's still here, so that's going to be the next one. I would think Ciani's pretty safe at this part. Nootbaar and Donovan. That's probably what you got, and you have your ace in Gray for a while, and you could supplement that with a few deals, and you definitely have Fedde next year. You're going to see what you have with Matz. You bring back one of the veterans, and then you see um, who's knocking on the door. Speaking of which, though, we haven't brought up McGreevy at all.
Yeah, this is true.
Yeah, what a start. You know what I'm saying? That was huge. And it was one of those that kind of saved them. It was I love that kind of stuff when they, call up last minute, guys aren't prepared for you, and it just worked out. And maybe that's the shot in the arm he needed.
Yeah, I mean, it was very. I mean, yeah, you hear that he gets the call from his manager, and he's expected that he's been traded.
He's traded
instead of getting the call up to St. Louis. Not been high on Michael McGreevy, and I think it's fair to say that, right? I mean, his numbers are not necessarily overwhelming in the minor leagues, but he's still, in the top 20 prospects of the Cardinals organization, and he came up and did a fantastic job, and the Cardinals let him. I think that was the interesting thing too, right? I mean, a part of it was to he's brought up to kind of give everybody a rest and everything. They want him to do as much as he can. But we saw Graceffo come up, and make his debut, and he got pulled in 2 innings, 2.5, is something like that, real early. And even when he wasn't like getting blown up or anything. He's like he gave up running. They basically made it a bullpen game. We saw Kloffenstein come up, and they used him as a reliever. It was very interesting to me that they just kind of let McGreevy ride. Now, granted, he was pitching well enough that it would have been difficult for them to take him out. And I don't know if that was the original plan, but it was interesting to me a little bit that they treated him a little differently than the other 2 guys. And I don't know if that's because they expect him to be a starter at some point in time in St. Louis, where the other 2 guys may be relievers. I don't know, but it was a little bit interesting that, he was out there. I mean, even past the 5th inning, even with a scoreless game, you might have seen them to go to it, but he pitched 7, right? And it was incredible. There's no doubt about it. And then of course he gets the ticket back to Memphis, which he knew was going to happen.
Yeah, I knew that was coming. Yeah.
But he's definitely, put himself on the radar. He's now on the 40-man. It would be surprising if we didn't see him again at some point in time this year.
Sure.
Then again, we said that about Kloffenstein, and Graceffo has made another. I think he did another shot up here, but I don't know. It was was a very surprising one. I was not expecting that, and it was a shot in the arm. There's no doubt that they needed.
Sure. Yeah, that was the biggest win of the week.
Yeah, and to do it against the defending World Series champions. I mean,
yeah,
and they didn't necessarily run out the getaway lineup either. So, yeah, it was great, and we'll see how that matters.
Good works in the future.
Yeah, and maybe if nothing else, there's something to sell this offseason, right? If for some reason you decide you want to trade McGreevy, at least you can tell another team, look, he's had success at the major league level. He's pitched here. He can do this. I don't know that they'll do that, and I don't know how far that goes. But at least it's proof of concept, if nothing else. So, speaking of prospects, JJ Weatherholt got to start his career. He's hitting down there at Palm Beach. I was going to be interested to see where they started him. They did start him at the bottom rung, but he's hitting the ball very hard down there, and it seems unlikely. It feels like he's going to make a jump up to a Peoria fairly soon.
Yeah, they like to fast track those guys too, just for A, look, and B, attendance numbers at those ballparks. He'll hit his way out of there pretty quickly, and that's another thing that we've drawn that comparison to where I think college baseball has shortened that path a little bit.
Yeah. I think you're right, and especially guys that have advanced, hit tools, or advanced. Nobody's advanced like Paul Skeens is advanced, I don't think.
Yeah.
But still, the high level pitchers are probably going to move faster, and I mean that's also shifted because we talk about a prime as we always used to when we were growing up. The prime of a baseball player was 27 to 32.
Yeah.
But you look at the numbers and stats and stuff. That prime's probably more like 25 to 30 or something like that. And you got to get them. Teams want to get these guys up there because, especially with 6 years of control, they could be, if they take too long, their prime's going to start before they get up, or if nothing else, they're going to be on the downhill slide before they even get out of arbitration. So. It's just the changing nature of baseball to some degree.
Yeah, that's maximize value.
Yeah,
it's you've seen that a lot.
Absolutely. All right, is there anything else we're missing from this week?
No, I don't think so.
I think
heading into a couple day games.
Yeah, well, a game today, and then night game tomorrow night. They're on the
they're on. I forgot about that. They're
on TVs
prime time.
Sunday night, so they've got that, and then like I say, the weird makeup game against the Mets, and then 3 with the Rays. Which again, Thursday's game's a little interesting. It's a 6:15 start instead of the normal 6:45 or afternoon game. It's just bumping it up by half an hour, which. There are reasons for that. That's written into the CBA on what you can do and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure that if you can get away with not playing a game at 12:05 in St. Louis in August,
in July, or in August,
you want to avoid that if at all possible. So anyway, all right. Well, Alan and I should be back at you next week. And we'll talk about this, where the Cardinals are at, and hopefully a little bit more. They'll be a little bit better spot than they are right now. But until then, for Alan, I'm Daniel. Good night.
Good night.
It is a distinct possibility that this is his last at bat of 1998. But take a good long look. This is going to have to last you until next March in Florida. First and third, 2 out. Into the field, number 70.